Fellas, today we're going to be taking a look at the best UFC events in modern UFC history. Well, no, not modern UFC, yeah, just modern UFC. We're going to be looking at different fight nights and pay-per-views that I personally think are better than the bog standard, just boring fight night or the pay-per-view. These are ones that stand out from the rest, ones that you need to kind of remember, ones that are better than average. And yeah, we're going to be taking a look in modern UFC because realistically, if I was to do of all time, I think this video would probably go on forever, so we're only going to be including like modern UFC like recently, so just keep that in mind. And yeah, if you agree with these takes, please let me know. Same if you disagree with these takes. And yeah, we're just going to go straight in there. Starting off with UFC 268. This was an insane card that no one talks about. I believe it was late 2021, this card. Yeah, this was stacked. This was stacked. I mean, you can see the fight card itself. It was absolutely stacked. First, we had Usman versus Colby. The build-up to this fight was insane because, listen, if you got Colby Covington on a press conference, he's going to sell the fight, all right? That's just knowledge. If you've got Colby Covington, he's going to sell the fight. Usman at this point, I think he came off a KO against Masvidal as well, so he had kind of some momentum. And yeah, it was a fun fight between them both. It was competitive. People thought Colby won, but a lot of people thought Usman won. It was competitive. And it was just a really fun fight between them both. This was the rematch as well. Another chance for Colby to get the belt. Unfortunately, he didn't, but was what it was. Then we had Rose Namajunas defend against Zhang Weili. Rose Namajunas had so much fucking, what's it called? Like momentum, because she was coming off a knockout against Zhang Weili where she got a massive head kick KO. And this was a chance for Zhang Weili, who's insane. I mean, look at what Zhang Weili's doing now. She just dominated Amanda Lemos. And at this point, Namajunas used a lot of wrestling to kind of just out-wrestle Zhang Weili and beat her fair and square and got the decision. It was another close fight. It was also, it was another close fight between them both, but Rose Namajunas came up on top. Then we had Marlon Vera versus Frankie Edgar. Everyone started crying because Frankie Edgar got knocked out, unfortunately. But hey, a new star was born here in Marlon Vera. He knocked out Frankie Edgar. I think it was to a front kick to the face or a head kick, and it put Frankie Edgar to sleep. This was a great KO by Marlon Vera, showing why he's one of the best. And look at where he is now. He's going to be fighting for a belt against Sean O'Malley soon. So you got to give him props. You got to give Marlon Vera his props for this. Frankie Edgar, unfortunately, didn't win a fight after this. He went on to get knocked out by Chris Gutierrez. But anyway, then we had Shane Burgos versus Billy Quintanillo. Another great fight there. Can't say Billy's last name, but another great fight there. And then we had one of the fights of the years. Chandler versus Gaethje. This was an insane fight. Chandler displaying perfectly why he's got zero fight IQ. And we had some other memorable moments. We had Alex Pereira knock out his opponent. We had Bobby Green knock out his opponent. Chris Curtis get a KO. We had the debut of Ian Gary, who also KO'd his opponents. And we had Chris Barnett, who debuted and KO'd his opponent. And this fight card was also supposed to have Luke Rockhold versus Sean Strickland, but unfortunately that one got pulled out. But that would have been great. That would have been great. The trash talk between them and the fight itself. So this card was one of the best. So many prospects were born on this card. Amazing card. Next up we have UFC 281. This was last November. For some reason, November always have great cards. We've got another good one this year with UFC 295. But anyway, UFC 281 was insane. We started off the card. Well, we didn't start off the card, but the main event of the card was Pereira versus Adesanya. This was, Adesanya's nemesis. This was this rival, and Pereira just comes in the UFC and knocks him out. Well, didn't knock him out cold, but it was kind of just, it was a nice little kickboxing fight, high levels kickboxing fight until Pereira managed to finish Adesanya, which one of the most memorable finishes in UFC history because Adesanya had never been finished in MMA before, and Pereira just went out there and finished him. Co-main event, everyone hated Carla Esparza because she just had the most boring fight in UFC history with Rose Namajunas, and Zhang Weili just comes in and dominates her. Zhang Weili batters her, and she became a fan favourite literally just for beating Carla Esparza. Like, imagine becoming a fan favourite because you beat someone who everyone hates. Carla Esparza, I believe, hasn't fought since this fight, I don't think. So Zhang Weili changed her, and that was a dominant performance from Weili. Then we had Poirier versus Chandler, which was another fight of the year. So much blood. It was such a good fight, which you've got to be expected when it's a Michael Chandler fight. And Poirier submitted Michael Chandler. Again, Michael Chandler's fight IQ is terrible because he nearly finished him in the first round, then decides to go for a takedown, which was stupid. But yeah, Michael Chandler showing mine's the best. My mark's being weird. Then we had, again, Frankie Edgar getting knocked out by Chris Gutierrez. And I think this was Frankie Edgar's retirement fight as well. So a lot of these cards that are involving Frankie Edgar just ain't great for him. Then we had Dan Hooker get a win over Claudio Pugliese. I can't say his name, but Claudio. And this was good as well because Dan Hooker was on a bit of a losing streak. He wasn't in a great spot in his career, and Claudio Puelles was doing. He just kept like he's doing that Cron Gracie jiu-jitsu crawl. It didn't work. He got TKO'd by Dan Hooker. Then we had Renato Moicano submit Brad Riddell. We had Ryan Spann knock out Dominic Reyes. And we had Erin Blackfield submit Molly McCann, which everyone was grateful for because Molly McCann was hated. Everyone hated Molly McCann, and she just went in there, and Blackfield just went in there and submitted her. And Blackfield's one of the best man. So this card was amazing. Probably one of the best cards we've had in recent MMA. Stacked, and it performed as well. So many finishes. So I'm going to go UFC 281. Next up, recently, UFC 290. This was only last month, and I think this was a great card. We had Volkanovski TKO Yair Rodriguez. It was a dominant performance. He dominated him on the feet, and then the second Yair Rodriguez started to do well, Volkanovski just took him down and beat the brakes off him, man. Yeah, Volkanovski battered Yair Rodriguez. Then we had Alejandro Pantoja versus Moreno 3. This was a fight of the night. This was an absolute war. There was blood everywhere, just back and forth. And that's what you expect when Pantoja's fighting. The guy he's always in a war as Pantoja. But yeah, Pantoja versus Moreno, big mix of grappling and striking, but it was an absolute war. One of the best fights in UFC. This is a great way. This is a great co-main event, and we got crowned the new champion. Then we had Dricus du Plessis shock the world and TKO Robert Whittaker. Which no one expected to happen. Everyone thought Whittaker was going to maul him. I did too. But no, du Plessis got the win, finished him, and then the whole promo with Adesanya happened. Then we had Turner versus Hooker, which was again an absolute banger of a fight. This was the fight of the night, or at least it should have been one of the fights of the night, because that was a banger. That was such a good fight. And yeah, it was a great fight. You know, Jalen Turner nearly got finished so many times. There were so many times where I expected Jalen Turner to get finished, but he didn't, so fair play. And then we had Bo Nickel knock out Val Woodburn, proving why Bo Nickel's another prospect. I mean, Val Woodburn wasn't exactly a high-caliber opponent. I don't even think he was... I don't know why he was in the UFC. He does not deserve to be there, but hey, fair play for taking the fight. And then we had Robbie Lawler with the greatest retirement in UFC history. His last ever fight, goes out there and knocks out Nico Price in a few minutes. That was the best retirement in UFC history. You've got to admit, Robbie Lawler had the best retirement ever. And if you look at the prelims, there were so many finishes, like including Robbie Lawler's fight, so many finishes that were like so many fights that ended in like a minute. Look at the prelims for this fight or for this card. You'll see the amount of finishes there was in like 2 minutes. So many finishes. UFC 290 performed really well. Then another one that's fairly recent, UFC 280 in October of last year. This was a great card. This was stacked. We had Oliveira versus Makhachev. Makhachev managed to submit Charles Oliveira in Abu Dhabi. That was just a dominant fight. We had the best versus the best at lightweight, and it literally was the best versus the best. And Makhachev kind of dominated Oliveira. On the feet, he beat him. On the ground, he beat him. There was nothing Oliveira could do, but luckily we're going to see this match again. And I think it's October this year as well, so we get to see them both back. We had Sterling TKO Dillashaw. This was Sterling's second title defense, I think. Yeah, this was Sterling's second title defense against TJ Dillashaw's return after the Santagan fight. And Dillashaw got battered, which a lot of people wanted to see because Dillashaw isn't exactly the most liked person in the UFC. Sterling took him down, dominated him, and I think there was a bit of an injury with Dillashaw, but who cares? Let's get him out of the UFC. Then we had Sean O'Malley beat Yan, which was again what should have been one of the fights of the night. That was a banger of a fight. O'Malley's a huge name. PT Yan was the best in the world at that time besides Sterling, and O'Malley beat him fair and square. It was a back and forth fight, but it was an absolute war, bloodbath, great fight, great featured fight. Then we had Gamrot versus Dariush, which is a nice little fight. You know, Dariush dominated Gamrot. That wasn't close. That showed why Dariush is one of the best in the world. So you got to give it to Gamrot. Yeah, sorry, you got to give it to Dariush for that. Then we had Bilal the Bum Muhammad, the most boring fighter in the UFC, finally get a finish. He was getting mocked by everyone for not getting a finish, and he finally got a finish. He got a TKO on the feet against Sean Brady. yeah, he went from remember the decision to remember the name. Sean Brady, I don't know how he managed to let Bilal Muhammad finish him, but he did. But yeah, fair play to Bilal Muhammad. And then we got Muhammad Makayev, huge prospect, subbed Malcolm Gordon in a very competitive fight, but yeah, great submission by Makayev. And we also had some stacked names on the undercard. We had I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name, but we had the Brazilian Donny. Then we had Volkan Oezdemir versus Nikita Krylov, which is a great matchmaking. And then we had two Dagestanis fight each other, which was kind of like, you know, everyone from Russia was watching, but still, stacked card. So many finishes on this card as well. And it performed great. And next, finally, this was recent, and I actually missed this card. I set my alarm to fight. So here in the UK, UFC pay-per-views go on from like 3 a.m. to like, the main card goes from 3 a.m. to like 6, 7 a.m. I set my alarm to watch the fight, and I missed it. I missed the entire card, so I'm so pissed that I missed it, but it was such a good card, man. It was stacked, and it performed well in Miami. UFC need to go to Miami more often, because Miami is a great place for UFC. We had Adesanya brutally knock out Pereira like he owed him money. That was a great fight between them both. Competitive first round, and Adesanya just knocks him out cold, gets the middleweight belt back. And then we had Burns defeat Masvidal. A lot of people didn't really like Masvidal, but it was in Miami. It was in his hometown. But Gilbert Burns beat him fair and square. Yeah, Burns, not much to say really. Beat him on the feet and the floor, obviously. Dominated Masvidal, sent him out the UFC. Then we had Rob Font getting insane knockout over Adrian Yanez. Adrian Yanez looks like... Am I the only one who thinks that Adrian Yanez looks really similar to like a young Masvidal? Anyway, yeah, Yanez was a prospect at this time. He'd come off a finish, I think. And Rob Font returning after a couple losses just knocks him out cold. Out of nowhere, just KOs him out cold. Great knockout. Then we had Holland knock out Ponzinibbio in a really weird knockout where Ponzinibbio was face first to the canvas. Holland deserves a big fight, man. He's just finished, what's his name? He's just finished Michael Chiesa at UFC 291, so he needs a big fight. But this is a big fight as well. Holland just knocks out Ponzinibbio. And then we had Raul Rosas Jr., who no one really liked because people say Raul Rosas Jr. was talking like he was going to be double champ. I think he said he could beat Aljamain Sterling, and then he goes against an unranked Christian Rodriguez, and Rodriguez kind of dominates him the entire fight. Rosas Jr., yeah, this wasn't a great look for him. But anyway, then we had on the prelim headliner Chris Curtis versus Kelvin Gastelum, which in my opinion was one of the best fights. This was an absolute banger, back and forth. Gastelum got another win. This was an insane fight. I'm so annoyed I missed it, but Chris Curtis definitely went to Twitter after this fight and started crying. Chris Curtis's Twitter is so delusional, man. He just cries over everything. Anyway, then we had Joe Pyfer getting a knockout over GM3. I'm just waiting for GM3 to be cut from the UFC because he lost again this weekend at UFC 292. So I'm wondering when GM3 is going to get cut. But this was stacked. A lot of finishes on this card, and it's always good when we have a card like UFC 287. Now I'm going to go for some fight nights. First of all, I'm going to go fight night Calvin Kattar versus Josh Emmett. This was a nice little fight night. We had Roman Dolidze, who's a huge prospect in the middleweight. Well, I won't call him a huge prospect, but he's a ranked guy in the middleweight division now, coming off a loss to Marvin Vettori, but he's going to be fighting Derek Brunson, and you want to tune in because he's going to maul Derek Brunson, but he got a finish over Kyle Dorcas, which was impressive. Roman Dolidze is a killer, man. Absolute killer. We had Adrian Yanez knockout, I think it was Tony Kelly, which was a very satisfying for a lot of people because Tony Kelly was talking mad. Tony Kelly was talking about a lot of it like he was, I don't know, he was just trash talking a lot. And Adrian Yanez knocked him out again like he owed him lunch money. Then we had Joaquin Buckley knock out Duriev. Always exciting to watch a Russian guy get knocked out. I'm joking for all the Islam fans, but yeah, Joaquin Buckley got a knockout. Then we had Kevin Holland, again, BMF, sub Tim Means. Holland, man, we need to give him a big fight. He deserves a huge fight, does Holland, because he's always turning up. Got a submission over Tim Means. And then finally we had Josh Emmett we had Cowboy versus Lawson, but that actually didn't happen, I don't think, because either Cowboy was sick or João Lawson blew his leg out. One of the two. I forgot which one because they both happened. But then we had Calvin Kattar versus Josh Emmett, which was a robbery, I think. I think a lot of people thought that Calvin Kattar should have won this fight, but it was still a good performance from both of them. Finally, we had Aspinall versus Volkov. That for me, This fight night felt like a pay-per-view. If you watch this, you'll know that this fight night genuinely felt like a pay-per-view. It was one of the best fight nights I've ever witnessed, especially as a British, like, because I'm British myself. Watching so many English fighters on this card get wins and stuff, it was insane. First of all, we started off with a main event. Aspinall submitted Volkov, and this was kind of the make it or break it fight for Aspinall. If he won this fight, it was kind of, he was the guy at heavyweight. He was the guy, and he went out there and dominated Volkov. It wasn't even close. Aspinall entered the matrix, couldn't get hit, took him down, submitted him, straight arm lock, easy, dominated Volkov like no one had ever done that to Volkov before. Then we had Arnold Allen absolutely steamrolled Dan Hooker. That wasn't even close either. Arnold Allen just steamrolled him like he owed him money. And another prospect with Arnold Allen there was made. Dan Hooker unfortunately got battered in this fight. He got battered. Then we had Paddy Pimblett submit Vargas. Paddy Pimblett at this time was a huge prospect in the UK. The crowd were going wild. He goes in there, has a little bit of adversity at the start of the fight, but then manages to pick up a submission against Vargas, and the hype lives on. Then we had Nelson get a nice little win over Sato. Gunnar Nelson's insane. Then we had Molly McCann. Now, listen, you might not like Molly McCann, but you've got to agree that this knockout was one of the best knockouts of the year. Spinning elbow, KO to Carolina, put her out cold. It was a great knockout. You can't lie. It was an insane knockout. I didn't like how she started running around with a belt after this fight, because you're not a champion. You got smoked in your last 2 fights, but it was a great knockout. Then we had Jai Herbert versus Ilia Topuria, this was actually the first time Ilia Topuria had faced any sort of adversity in the UFC. Herbert went for a head kick and nearly put Topuria out. He nearly put him to sleep. Topuria stayed in the fight and eventually got a knockout. He put Jai Herbert out cold, put him limp, absolutely destroyed him in that knockout. Then we had Pavlovich getting a nice little knockout. Obviously, Pavlovich, look at where he's at now, but he got another first-round knockout against the Dagestani. Then we had Paul Craig versus Krylov. Krylov was actually winning this fight as well. He was actually doing all right against Paul Craig, but Paul Craig, being the guy he is, manages to pick up a submission against Krylov in front of his home crowd. Yeah, fair play to him. He can find a submission from anywhere, can Paul Craig. And then we had Makayev, who's a huge prospect, get a nice little win over Durden and continue to live his legacy. So that fight was, I think this was Makayev's debut as well, and that fight was insane because Makayev knocked him out and submitted him in the same fight. He drops Durden. I think Durden was out cold for a second. Then the second he wakes up, Makayev gets him into a submission and puts him, submits him again. So this was amazing. If you witness this fight night live, you'll know what I'm talking about. It felt like a pay-per-view. Watching this live with the crowd and everything felt like a pay-per-view. So I'm going to say that this was the best fight night. But yeah, please let me know if you agree with these. These, in my opinion, the best UFC events in modern UFC. And yeah, thank you for